Bulls. On today's episode, I want to talk and discuss why the Bulls' new coaching staff can either be one of the reasons why this Bulls team exceeds expectations, or it could be one of the biggest things to hold this team back this upcoming year. We're going to talk about both sides of that, all that and more on today's Locked On Bulls.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. My name is Haize. I'm host and creator of Chicago Bulls Central and Chicago Bears Central YouTube pages and podcasts. And today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. With that said, let's get into it today, y'all. It's game day. The Chicago Bulls take the court today in Cleveland against the Cleveland Cavaliers for the Bulls' first preseason game, which we'll be previewing towards the end of this episode. But more importantly than that, I want to start off talking about where I think it all begins at. Now, this is to make no mistake about it. The roster that AK built is the roster that AK built. We did go considerably younger. We have a lot of young pieces, some promising pieces, some pieces that have already shown bits and pieces of what they can do at the NBA level. But coaching is something that I think it largely goes either overstated or understated, depending on the coach that you have and the fan base, right? Me and Pat for a long time talked about Billy Donovan and our thoughts. We had differing opinions on Billy Donovan and how much his coaching was either holding back the Chicago Bulls team or whatever there. And, this season, the Bulls added 2 veteran assistants in Dan Craig and Wes Unseld Jr., one of which Billy Donovan has already turned the defense over to in Wes Unseld Jr., which we'll talk about here in a second. But when you go younger, right, and you're trying to adapt a new style, on top of that, one thing that we've been able to say about Billy Donovan and his system for the longest is that it excels when you have a point guard playing at a high level. And Josh Giddey, hopefully, is going to be that for Billy Donovan in this system and be able to help this team with what it's trying to go to. But overall, coaching is something that I don't want to overlook the importance of coaching in this phase that the Bulls are in. It's a very vital, important part of this team. And I think even before you get into the Modest Busillas, the Dalen Terry, the Julian Phillips, and talk about the way that they want to develop in this upcoming season, you got to talk about figuring out the balance of this team, right? And you talk about starting Josh Giddey at point guard, Kobe White being the 2 guard, Zach LaVine moving from being the 2 guard to the wing player and possibly playing more off ball and less isolation than he's ever played in his career. Coaching, getting this team together is one of the most important factors of this offseason. And I think especially when you also look at the fact that this team trying to implement this new offensive style. Now, I got to give Billy Donovan credit. Implementing a 14-second shot clock in practice was really good. It was really, really smart, right? But one of the things that has been holding this team back offensively for a while now, for years, has been the lack of movement off the ball. What does off-ball movement bring for a team? It creates open lanes. It creates opportunity. It moves the defensive around. And while you're forcing the defense to move around, thus you're getting easier shots. One thing that this Bulls team has really made more difficult on themselves over the last few years is everything that the offense got was just more tough because we didn't move without the ball. We had 2 players really that consistently moved out the ball over the last few years. That was Derrick Jones Jr. when he was here. That's Javonte Green. And also Alex Cruz. We got to give Alex Cruz on there as well. Those are really the only 3 players over the last 2-3 seasons for the Bulls that consistently moved off the ball. Io's done it at times, right? I think he did it the most that he's ever done it last season. And I got to give him credit for this growth and his added awareness last year. But we got to get better in that aspect. And when you look at this Bulls team, one thing that the more optimistic Bulls fans have really said over the last few months is that this team can exceed expectations. And Billy Donovan has coached a team before that exceeded expectations. And that was the 2019-20 OKC Thunder team. Now, I'm not going to get into a large, in-depth comparison between these 2 teams. I actually did that over on Chicago Bulls Central today. If you want to check out that content, go over there. But one thing that team did is that the way that the pieces fit together, the way that it was coached, right? When you look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's still figuring out leading that team in scoring, Chris Paul, who was coming off a down year in Houston, ended up having a really good year with that OKC Thunder team that year. Danilo Gallinari being second or third in the team in scoring. Denny Schroeder averaging 18 points off the bench. Like, that team really did excel, and a lot of that was out on the perimeter, right? And so coaching comes down to a big part of that, because you want the system to fit the player's skill set. You want to be able to put players in the best situation. And so Billy Donovan got to be a huge part of that. But one thing that, whether it was AK, whether it was Billy Donovan's decisions, whoever's decision it was, that I love that this team did this offseason, is they got 2 veteran assistant coaches that have both been part of championship franchises. You look at Dan Craig, for example. He's worked under Eric Spoelstra. He worked under Tyronn Lue. These are 2 coaches that are considered to be 2 of the better coaches in the NBA. Spoelstra, by far, is probably considered the best coach in the NBA, right? And so you're hoping that they're bringing some of what they learned from working under those coaches, especially in the Dan Craig. And Dan Craig's also being part of that Miami Heat team, being under Tyronn Lue. He's been on franchises that have had to figure it out, right? That didn't necessarily always have the best individual pieces, but they had to figure it out. And so you got to maximize on your potential. You have to maximize on the skill sets as you have here. You have to put the players in the right position. And so that all plays a big part into that as well in what you're going into this season. You're hoping that the Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, right, Modest Bucilis, Ayo Dosunmu, Patrick Williams takes a step, right? You're hoping that all these guys really develop considerably for your team, and coaching is a big part of that. One thing that Dan Craig has also been in charge of, he was the head of player development for a while there with the Miami Heat. And I think most people will agree that the Miami Heat do some pretty damn good developing themselves there. So that's something as well that you want to look at. So there's a lot of things that this coaching staff can help elevate, right? And I asked the question a couple of weeks ago about, can Billy Donovan elevate this Bulls team? But it's not just about Billy Donovan. It's about your coaching staff. Can your staff overall elevate this team? And one part that I do want to highlight in this as well is I want to highlight the importance that Wes Unseld Jr. has taken over the defense. Now, it's been in training camp. We don't know if he's going to be the Tom Thibodeau to Billy Donovan's head coach, to where he's actually calling the defensive plays, where the Bulls are out there on a defensive possession and Wes Unseld Jr. is the one standing up and calling out what the team needs to do and things defensively. I don't know that yet. The games aren't on. We don't know that. But in training camp, Billy Donovan turned the defensive philosophy, the defensive building, the defensive mindset, establishing that over to Wes Unseld Jr. And I know my more pessimistic fans are going to say, well, Haize, Wes Unseld Jr. was a terrible head coach. Look at the record that Washington Wizards team had. Look at this, look at that. I'm not going to say you're wrong there, but look at what Wes Unseld Jr. did having a similar role with the Denver Nuggets, right? And we know what that team was defensively, even while not having some of the best one-on-one defensive teams. He also was in charge of player development, right? And so having somebody that has been in charge of developing players while establishing a new defensive system and also trying to grow those players as well, that's a big part of that. And I love this comment here from Winton Mahorn. Hopefully Wes Unseld Jr. and Dan Craig will check Billy Donovan's wrong coaching decisions this season. That's a strong way to word it, but you want it to be collaborative, right? I think you want the whole point of building a staff. The reason why there's a staff in coaching is that, much like with a team, what do I always say? For guys that have been watching Locked On Bulls, Chicago Bulls Central for a while, I always say it's not necessarily about the individual pieces. It's about how the things come together, right? And that's what you want with the coaching staff. When you're building a roster, you want to build a roster that is there, that some of the guys are helped there to overcome other guys' flaws, right? That's what role players are there for. Much like with assistant coaches, you want assistant coaches that bring a level of awareness, or that bring an outlook, or that bring a perspective that your head coach could be missing. So that way, when they're working collaboratively, which I keep getting tongue-tied on that word, when they're working on that together, you're able to kind of have a 360 view of the situation, because your assistant coaches are bringing something that you may lack. And don't overlook John Bryant in this either. A really young coach in his coaching career. He's not going to maybe have the kind of voice that a Wes Unseld Jr. and a Dan Craig have. But John Bryant is also somebody who's been here and worked his way up through the Bulls system, coaching the Summer League Bulls, being on the Windy City Bulls, those type of things. So working his way up as well. And that's something that Dan Craig, that's something that Wes Unseld did as well, right? So, maybe the Bulls are setting up a succession path here. I'm not saying that that's the case necessarily. We know that this front office loves Billy Donovan, so I'm not even going to try to sell you guys on a succession path being named here for the Bulls, but I am going to sell you guys on what we've built here with the roster. The coaching staff is just as important. And if that coaching staff does not get it together, it could be, like I said at the beginning, the title of this video, it could be one of the biggest reasons for success, or it can be one of the biggest reasons that this roster does not reach its full potential. And we'll be seeing what that story ends up entailing here as the season is right around the corner. Next up, I want to talk about the Bulls All Access Training Camp Episode 2, which was focused heavily on Ayo Dosunmu. But before we get into that, I got to get into a message from one of our sponsors. And this time it's FanDuel. All right, Bulls fans, I've been telling you guys about FanDuel for quite a while. It's been one of the more consistent sponsors we've had here on Locked On Bulls. And you can start the season with a big return over at FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. If I don't drill home anything else to you guys, I want to drill home this. When you're placing bets, you have to go out and get the latest information, whether it's stats, whether it's play-by-play, whether it's advanced analytics, no matter what it is. The ability to be able to do all of that on the same page where you can place your bet, it just saves you time. So when you're trying to get in that last-minute parlay, go ahead and get it in on FanDuel, man. Plus, when you get started, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, some of y'all been taking y'all dates out for 4 for 4 at Wendy's. Save some money, right? Get and have to pay less on your bets. Get a $5 bet and get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed $200 for $5. What type of value is that? I've been helping you guys out, man. I've been trying to get you guys, to get your ladies out a little bit more. FanDuel can help you do that with the savings that they're offering there. Visit FanDuel.com. Again, $200 in bonus bets. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com. Tell them Haize sent you. All right, Bulls fans, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, making Locked On Bulls your first listen live every single day. And as we've converted this show to be a live mainly show, I appreciate you guys for all the support and turning up every day at 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time to watch Locked On Bulls and hang out with your boy Haize. But with that said, we got to hang out kind of post-edited with the Chicago Bulls in the All Access. And I love the fact that the Bulls do this All Access because it does give an extra insight and kind of line of view into what's going on in the season. And this All Access second episode for training camp, it started off with John Bryant, again, one of the assistant coaches here, passing the ball around and saying that when the ball comes to you, I want you to mention one guy that helped you with practice. And Dalen Terry first mentioned Ayo Dosunmu. We got Javon Carter. I forgot, he mentioned Torrey Craig. Ayo Dosunmu mentioned Nikola Vucevic. But overall, once we moved from that section of All Access, we moved over to following Ayo Dosunmu. And he went to his old high school. He talked to some of his old teachers. He talked about what they were able to establish both in college and getting ready for the NBA game. Also talking about what they're trying to do is establishing here in the Chicago Bulls. And one thing that you can continue to see is that Ayo Dosunmu's growth as a leader, it's not just a narrative. I'm telling y'all that right now. The way that Ayo Dosunmu, the level of calmness, the level of awareness that he has, right, of explaining what teams are trying to do, what the philosophies are and those type of things, like his basketball IQ may be at an all-time high right now. And the confidence. We've talked about how things overlap, right? When you get a player in their prime, one of the things that you're hoping all overlaps in their prime is they play the best, right? As far as they're in their peak physical conditioning. The mental part of the game is at its best for them, whether the game slow down or they increase their basketball IQ, and then the confidence that they have in themselves. Ayo Dosunmu is bringing all those things together right now for the Chicago Bulls. And let's see how it pays off into the season. Again, guys, do not try to create your entire think pieces on the Bulls season based off the first preseason game. We'll get into that towards the end of the show, right? I want to establish that. Don't come in here saying after the first preseason game, well, Haize, Ayo didn't look like much of a leader out there. It's a preseason game. The starters may not even, the main guys may not even play a lot. So let's not do that, right? I'm going to cut that off at the head. When I come here live tonight with Quentin from Let's Talk Bulls, who's going to be my guest on the post-game show today. When I come here live tonight to talk about the game, do not have these deep think pieces on a preseason game, the first one at that. Please don't do it. Save me some stress. I just saved you guys some money. I'm going to save you guys on a date night later on in this episode. Don't cause me stress. Don't do it. Thank you. Now, with that said, Ayo Dosunmu, and not just him, right? Of course, this is what the episode focused on. But you can tell that Ayo has really taken the fact of him coming in, going into his fourth year, and a team that's really trying to establish new things. He's taken that very seriously. And so that plays a big part into what Ayo's mentality is. And we've seen it before. We've seen irrational confidence before. And I don't even think Ayo's is irrational confidence. I talked about with you guys yesterday on just how important Ayo Dosunmu is and why Ayo is so slept on. I'm telling you guys, the season that Ayo Dosunmu could potentially have for the Chicago Bulls team, expect, whereas a lot of trade rumors around Zach LaVine and stuff are naturally happening right now, Ayo Dosunmu could become one of the hottest trade targets on the market if the Bulls were to make him available. I hope that they don't. I want to be clear there. I hope that they don't. But it could end up going that way. And Ayo Dosunmu is just offering so much of what the Bulls need as far as leadership, the defense, if that three-point shooting comes along for him as well. And going into this season for the Bulls, it's about establishing your foundation. We're back at that point. Now, we think we know what the foundation is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it's going to be, right? We've seen franchises before come into a season where maybe they have a new signing, maybe they have a draft pick that they think is going to be the cornerstone, and it ends up being somebody that was already on the roster that people forgot about that ends up excelling. And so overall, not just with Ayo Dosunmu, part of the biggest thing for this Bulls team right now is, hey, first, last, don't even say that. Go knock on wood right now. Because this is the Chicago Bulls, and we know what's happened here with the Bulls and previously. Go knock on wood right now. Please do. But with that said, like, what this team is going to is trying to, the next phase that they're into, they're trying to establish that foundation. And they're hoping guys like Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Montes Bucilis, Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, Jalen Smith, they're hoping that some of these guys, a combination of it, what I just named 8 guys, that a combination of those 8 guys prove to be something that they can build off of going forward, right? And then how you build on that, how that fits together, that all comes down to how the ceiling of this team, right? Right now, we can't talk about a ceiling. We can't really realistic. I mean, the floor is the floor, right? We can't talk about a ceiling because so much with this Bulls team, and I think I forgot to mention Patrick Williams, adding Patrick Williams in that. So much of this team is still trying to wait and see. Now, Kobe and Ayo, if they can build off of what they did last season, of course, we kind of know what they are. Josh Giddey, I don't care what he did in 2021-22. I do, but he's 21 years old. There's a whole lot of growth left to be done with him, too. And then, of course, the Patrick Williams, the Dalen Terrys, all those guys. And so if you can get one of those young guys, whether that be Ayo, whether that be anybody else, that turns into that leader for you, that's a huge step in the right direction. A huge, extreme big step in the right direction. You want one of your young guys to be your leader this season. And it's shaped up right now to look like Kobe and Ayo have really both worked into it. Ayo talked about in this all access the importance. He specifically said out his own mouth saying that we understood that developing couldn't just be waiting until we get into training camp. We needed to do something before then. That's why the Miami mini camps happen. And you don't see a lot of teams do that. I think that because that happened this year with the Bulls, we kind of overlook how important that is. Not every team is having mini camps led by their players that they decide to all get together in a city, in a hotel, and practice and go through training, go through workouts together. Like you don't have, this isn't the NFL. You do not have mini camps in the NBA. And so the Bulls doing that goes a long way to show that they're trying to establish a leadership. It really doesn't mean anything for the success of the season per se, right? Just because we had a mini camp doesn't mean that this season is going to be much more of a success, but it does go a long way in establishing a hierarchy and establishing a culture. And that's something that the Bulls have been lacking for the better part of a decade. We haven't had a culture. Our culture has been struggle and hope. And so trying to get to that point, little things like that is what helps establish a culture. And let's hope that the Bulls can continue to build off of that. And that could be a launching pad for this season. And we'll see, right? We will see. But next up, we're going to talk about the Bulls preseason game today against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But before we get into that, got a message from you guys from Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Listen, Gametime is something I've been telling you guys about. It's not just about games, whether it's football, NFL, whatever it is. Football, NFL, basketball, NFL, right? You can get your comedy, you can get your theater, you can get your live events, anything that you have going on that is a live event, you can get those tickets over on Gametime, and they're also going to save you some money with that being said. All-in pricing, toggling this feature on shows the total upfront, so no surprise fees at checkouts, because some of y'all are penny pinching. And if you turn on the all-in pricing, you can see exactly what you're going to pay, so you don't have to make the excuse of, oh, I didn't know these taxes were going to be hit. Turn on the feature. Stop being cheap. Turn the feature on. Plus, they give you a panoramic view of your seat, so you can see exactly what you're going to see before you purchase your ticket. Plus, they have the best coverage in the ticketing industry. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy. If you find seats in the same section for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Hey, I told you guys before, you can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. $20 off. Go and take your person out. I keep telling you guys this. And listen, you can't take them to a Sox game anymore if you don't like them. So take them to a Drewski concert if you don't really like them. At least you can get them out. But download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's Gametime. All right, Bulls fans, I want to get into talking about the Bulls preseason game going down tonight. Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are on the road for this game. So they're in Cleveland, and you know where nobody wants to be? Nobody wants to be in Cleveland. But with that said, man, we got a good question here that I wanted to get back to. This one came from Big Diesel. It said, hey, so how much do you really think preseason games matter? Do they matter less than NFL preseason games? I think it's different for every team. If you're a team that's been, like, for example, the Denver Nuggets, that team's mainly been together for years. Preseason games don't really matter as much to them. But if you're a team that's gone through some considerable change, or you've gone through a head coaching change, or you're trying to change your system, that preseason can become more important. Now, I'm still not saying put a whole lot of importance on it. You're probably not going to see the Bulls starting five play a lot of minutes, right? And you look around the NBA so far in preseason, you've seen everything from some starters playing 10 minutes to some starters playing 20-plus minutes, right? So, but I think it's important for the Bulls in a couple of different areas, right? One, you're trying to establish your system. So you want to see that dynamic on the court against other teams that's building between Kobe and Giddey and Zach LaVine, those type of things. Another thing, you're trying to see who stands out. The Bulls rotation is not set, right? So you got guys that are fighting either for roster spots in Ernie Lopatim, Taylor Horton-Tucker, EJ Liddell, Kenny Lofton Jr. Like, these guys are competing for roster spots, right? So that does add a level of importance. Now, again, they're fighting for the back end of the roster spot. How much they'll play for the Bulls, that remains to be seen. But then you got guys that are fighting for minutes in the rotation. Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, Torrey Craig, Manas Busilis, right? These guys are all also trying to show, hey, we're bringing it, right? You're trying to show development as well for some of those young guys. So it depends. Like, as far as importance, I'll say this. Don't try to look at the preseason game and think, oh, the Bulls scored 105 points this game, we're going to have a high-powered offense. Don't take away from that, but take away from what's happening on the court. This is, if you want to take away anything from preseason, watch what players, little things, right? When is a player like Dalen cutting to the rim? Is he cutting at the right time? Do him and Iota Sumo or Dalen Terry have that type of chemistry to where Dalen's Giddey's catching Dalen cutting at the right time? Like, those little things is what you really want to look for in preseason, because that shows like the chemistry that you're building here with the team. That's the kind of thing that you're looking for, I think, in this opinion, is that you're looking for that. And as well as the system, right? Billy Donovan using a 14-second shot clock in practice to kind of make sure that this team is getting out in tempo is a really good thing. I think also fit. Let's look to see how Nikola Vucevic is really adapting to this new up-tempo offense that the Chicago Bulls are trying to run, because that theoretically may not fit in the best with his skill set or something like that. So there are those type of things that I think you're really trying to look for the Bulls in preseason, but you're not going to take a whole hell of a lot, but you're going to take some things. And I think that the things that you can take away from preseason games could pay off into the Bulls team as it goes forward. But we'll just see. We'll see. Big Diesel with another question. Haize, do you think Coach Donovan will finally have this team play with pace and space? Space, I don't know. I can't say with space because you need shooting for space. You can create space with cutting to the lane, things like that. But I do, as of right now this can go absolutely away the first week of the season. As of right now, I do think that this team is going to play with the quicker pace. I really do think that. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens there overall. But hey, make sure you guys are tuned in to what the Bulls are doing today. Great. Listen, I missed this one from Winton. John Bryant does seem to have a great relationship with players. We saw a bit of that on All Access episode 2. Yeah, very little bit of it. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in, man. Got this game going on today. We'll be live. I got a guest, Quentin from Let's Talk Bulls, coming on to help do the post-game show today. So make sure you guys stay in tune with that, with us there. Otherwise, you can follow me at CEO Haize. You can follow the channel at Locked On Bulls. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Bulls your first listen every single day. We are a member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day as well. And I'll see you guys later on, man. Love you guys. Go Bulls, see red. You already know what it is, man. We'll be back. Peace, y'all.